As always, when an era of Yu-Gi-Oh ends and a new one begins, we take a while to sit back and talk about what the show did wrong and what the show did right. And for Yu-Gi-Oh 7s, for me personally, not a lot they did wrong. But the things they did get wrong are definitely worth mentioning. This was probably the most polarizing Yu-Gi-Oh since Zale, and I'd argue there was even a substantially bigger just lack of interest from the general community, which is a shame, but I hope with this video we can kind of get to the bottom of why I feel like people maybe weren't that interested in this one and then weren't willing to give it a try as it went, and the people who did liked about it praised it. So yeah, we're just going to take a few minutes, talk about all the things I didn't like, which is ultimately just my opinion, and you can give your thoughts about that below. But as always, let's get started. So to start things off, we have something that I've brought up before, so I won't harp on it too much here, but I still think it needs to be said. And that is Seven's distribution. Now, many of you may be saying that that's not the show's fault, but I feel like the handling of it was a big issue for a lot of people with this one. And you see, unlike Vrains, which was streamed on Crunchyroll for everyone, this one wasn't legal anywhere, and there is currently at this time no dub. So no one in the West knows about it, and those who do are given no incentive to care. We didn't get rush duels here. No one really even knew any of this was going on until the Switch game came out, which they also barely did anything to promote, and I feel like that's kind of why the community didn't embrace Sevens at all, and it felt like a step back in so many ways. Rather it's just the streaming issue, or also just the fact that you have little kid main characters. Sevens Roads is a much more goofy thing, and you hear about the overemphasis on comedy. It makes people think this show isn't for them. And while it's not the show's job necessarily to make you think it is, people should be willing to give it a chance. It does stand to reason that if you're going to make it harder for people to watch the show and get into it, they're not going to get into it. So for number 4, we have kind of a weird one, because in a way this isn't a problem, but the more I thought about it, the worse it got. And that's just Goha as a whole. So when the show starts, Goha is presented as this big brother organization, and you just assume it's your standard Yu-Gi-Oh! Fret, fight the power, 5Ds again, blah blah bloobity. But no, as the show goes on, we find out Goha is actually just kind of a bunch of idiots who just kind of lucked their way into power and now refuse to give up that power. Something I think we all feel like is a problem in the real world. So where's the issue? Well, for me, I kind of feel like the show never really knew what it wanted to do with them. Sometimes it does play them up as a threat in the forms of things like Nail, or to a certain extent Asuna, or hinting at more to come that never happened. Sometimes they are just dumb and goofy, but then when they were, I didn't really feel like they took full advantage of them. You could really go and make them seem really dumb and just like total morons who just do nothing but cause problems. I want to believe this is genuinely an organization that can be brought down by an 11-year-old. And I kind of, when all was said and done, didn't feel that, but didn't feel like it was because they were strong or powerful. I just kind of ended up feeling nothing towards them. And when you're in most of the show, that's kind of a problem. So for number 3, we have something that might come off as more nitpicky than anything else, but it just kind of was one of those things that just added up for me. And that is, there's a lot of things that you could have done to flesh the world out a little bit more that just kind of weren't. I know this might sound like a weird one to some, because it is, but hear me out. So, inarguably, as far as I'm concerned, the main characters of this show are the best main character crew of any Yu-Gi-Oh! So naturally, you kind of want to learn more about them. But it kind of just picks and chooses. And then there's a lot of stuff on the table that I felt like could have been explored in a show where you don't always have a ton going on. Like, they make a big deal out of the fact that we never see Yuga's parents. Well, we don't see anyone's parents except Luke and Tiger's grandfather or some shit. Characters who should do a little bit more, like Roa, your rival, don't. There's a lot of like ramifications for actions that would have been interesting to see. There's a lot of world building opportunities that aren't built upon. The show decided very early on what it was going to do and how it was going to build on it, which was good, but it came at the cost of just so many little things you like to learn or you can learn that just makes the world feel a bit more realistic. Like, when you think about it, there are almost no characters over the age of 11 or 12 in this show. Like, there are very few adults, and there just seems like very little consequence for anything that happens. And yeah, the other Yu-Gi-Ohs play around with this a lot too, but it just felt so blatant in this one, and like something that just could have been avoided considering you had so much free time for just jokes. Oh boy. So, telling you all right now, this isn't the worst one, but man, I put way more thought into this one than I ever should have. Number 2 is the mind-boggling overall Yu-Gi-Oh universe. What the fuckery going on? So, after 2 shows where every summoning mechanic was utilized, got a little bit of focus, some involvement, and had a role to play in the show, it's all gone. And we have a much more simplified game state, which I understand. Rush Duels, more of a kid-friendly format, more of a simple format with its own set of complexities. The problem was they decided to bring in fusions, and no one knew what a fusion was, except at one point they go through a museum exhibit that has all the Gen 1 monsters in it, and presumably all the events of the first Yu-Gi-Oh! Happened, which means fusion fucking exists! I don't want to say, like, I keep feeling like Flame Swordsman was in that scene, but I'm too lazy to go double check. But then, this is a problem all the Yu-Gi-Ohs have, is they want to bake their cake and eat it too. They want you to believe it's all in the same universe to keep the older fans going on, but then they, like, do a lot of shit that makes it, like, not logical for them to be. So they all have this issue, but this is the one that really drew so much attention to it, because so much of the plot hinges on everything being in this weird pseudo world where it all would have had to have happened, but isn't. And, like, I can't tell how far in the future we are, and then it gets crazier, because then I think, like, when did Gohan take over? When did all this happen? They created Duel Discs? Is there no more Kaiba Corp? Was this the cheap knockoff company? End of the show. Otis created Duel Monsters. What the fuck happened to Pegasus? What is all this? It's just one of those things where it's like, it's not a problem until you draw attention to it, in which case now I'm like, what the fuck is going on? And last, but certainly not least, and genuinely, the only one of these that really bugged me when all was said and done was the way this show executed its plot. Now, many of you are going to say, but Sevens had no plot. It was just goofy nonsense for 92 episodes. No. There is a plot going on the whole time, and it is the fight the power elementary school kids dealing with Big Brother stuff. And the show presents this as being in the background so the character stuff can be in the forefront, which is not a terrible idea because they did such a good job with the characters, but it results in whenever plot is being given to us, instead of being shown, it's told. Every, like, big revelation, every big moment of conflict, every major story beat in this show is just thrown at you in just lazy expo dumps, and it genuinely gets annoying after a while. Like, oh, Yugioh and Roa, they have a connection, and the connection to Otis, oh, just gets dumped to you. Who's this Nail Kid? What's he's about? Oh, all of it just gets given to you at once. Oh, Asuna, and she's got a connection to Gohan's past. Oh, it's all just here. There's never any, like, pacing things out and learning things out little by little. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is supposed to be one of those shows where you kind of just, like, get answers as you go, but here it's just kind of like everything would be thrown at you at once, and that's just no fun. I can't really follow any of the plot. I can't really figure out where it's going or even want to because, well, I just don't have enough investment because the show's just not that invested. It results in just a very uneven watching experience because whenever stuff happens, I clearly know it was not planned. Now, you can make the argument GX also did that. Well, I don't like GX, but I will say this. GX played into the idea of it. With GX, whenever a big plot revelation happened or an arc got started, they almost like played into the idea that it was coming out of nowhere, that our characters didn't expect it, that they're living in a world where this isn't supposed to happen. Sevens doesn't do that. Sevens wants me to believe that everything is planned out and there's a reason for everything when I know there wasn't and you know there wasn't. And it's annoying because it ends up being the big stain on what was overall a really good show, which is, of course, what we will talk about next time, and that is what I loved about Yu-Gi-Oh! 7s, because there is a lot to love here. But what did you think about all these criticisms, and what are your own? Tell me that in the comments section below. And as always, click to like, click to subscribe, and join me next time for one final salute to the 7s era.